This is my 3-step ball striking blueprint that I give to all of my students that's seen so many of them elevate their ball striking to a completely new level and know it can work for you. It's actually really quite easy. And if you're somebody who struggles with early extension, stay tuned to the end because I've got a little kind of trick or different way of thinking about the golf swing which is going to help you eradicate that from your game. This is really focusing on downswing. You might be wondering why on earth I've got an alignment stick through my belt loops. It's going to become clear in a moment. I'd love you to do this. Many of you will have these alignment sticks and it's just a great visual to see exactly what they're doing. Hopefully, if I'm stood fairly neutrally, they are level. And when I set up to the golf ball, I have a little bit of weight on my lead side and my lead hip is fractionally higher. I hope the alignment stick is showing that. But as I make a backswing, because I am tilted over the golf ball, when I move into my backswing, there is angle through my hips. So my lead hip is lower than my trail hip. And that will be the case for almost all of you. We need that in the golf swing because we pivot on an angle. We don't pivot level. So here's the biggest fault that I see so many golfers making. Lead hip lower than trail hip at the end of the backswing. This is perfect. And what they do far too soon or far too early in the downswing is they raise that lead hip higher than the trail hip. You can see that there. What that means is it basically means you're pushing off the ground too soon. Now we need to push on the ground, but we don't need it at that stage in the downswing. As soon as that left hip gets too high, it forces the lead shoulder high, it forces the head down and back. You can probably see there's angle through my cap. My shoulders are too tilted. That pushes the weight onto this back leg, and we start to get really poor strikes that are thin, fat, really shallow. We lack a lot of distance. What do great players do? Well, this is what they do. Top of the backswing, same thing. This is lower than this. But as they move their pressure onto their onto their lead side, they have a lateral movement, but they keep the lead hip lower for longer. Now, when they arrive at impact, it's higher, as you can see it there, but it stays lower for that early part of the downswing, and that is the key point, and this is how you're going to feel and sense it. Take the golf club, put it across your shoulders, make a backswing, and all I want you to do is focus on keeping the lead side of the alignment stick lower than the trail side as you move into your left side. And you can see how there is some lateral movement. My hips are moving towards the target, and my lead hip is staying lower. What that's enabling me to do is basically build pressure through this lead leg. That's what the great players do. I am not yet pushing off that leg. That is very, very different to what many of you will be doing, which is pushing far too soon. And what I would love you to do as a little concept as you're doing this is imagine that you're stood on bathroom scales. This is showing a reading, this is showing a reading. Now, let's just use easy numbers for this. Let's say I weigh 100 kilos. This would show 50, this would show 50. This scale, as you start down, needs to shoot up towards 100, 110, 120 kilos, actually more than you weigh. If I weighed 100, moving my weight onto this leg would mean that scale would show 100. I don't want that. What I want is that scale to show more than 100. I'm really feeling like I'm putting pressure and force through that left side. That's keeping this lead hip low. That is the energy which we're going to use in our second phase in a moment to push up and out into our beautifully extended follow-through, which is phase 2. Now, once you have done that and you've built pressure into that lead side, you're in a great place to then kind of spring out the shot. And again, this is something that not enough golfers do well enough. Sometimes golfers can get into this position. Pressure into the lead side, lead hip is lower, but they don't deliver the club correctly because their body isn't functioning correctly. If I get into my lead side correctly, but I don't move my body out the way well enough, I'm going to be forced to use too much of my hands and arms, get in these really awkward positions at impact. So even if I get into my lead side, if I don't move out well enough, we get these kind of looks. And I'm sure you've seen golfers on the golf course. You might have even seen that in your own golf swing. It looks cramped, it looks awkward, and it looks like it's going to be inconsistent, and it very often is. This is the second phase. Now, I call this the Tommy Fleetwood drill. I love this drill. It's so difficult to do, but trust me, if you can do this in practice and start to nail this drill, you're going to really see your ball striking elevated to another level. The reason I call it the Tommy Fleetwood drill is because very often when he hits iron shots, he'll finish his golf swing here. I'm sure you've seen that. he has this beautiful finish with his body, but the club always looks like it's short of where it should be. Works for Tommy, it can work for you as well. So here's the little exercise I want you to do. It's kind of a little game that you're going to play with yourself. The goal is to see how far you can hit the golf ball, I'm going to do it with an 8-iron, before the club head passes above my lead shoulder in the follow-through. So how far can I hit the golf ball before the club passes my lead shoulder? You can see how that club is still lower than the shoulder. Just watch what happens when I don't use my body well enough through the hit. So I can get myself into this good position here, but if I don't use my body well enough, now already that club head has gone above my shoulder and the ball didn't go particularly far. It went 54 yards. So 54 yards and I already failed. The club went above my shoulder. Now just look what happens when I take that pressure that's under my lead side and I push and turn with my body. Club is short of my shoulder, body's in this position. That one went 136 yards, so more than double the distance, but I had so much more structure through this part of my swing. How did I do that? Well, what I did was I took that pressure that was under this leg and I pushed up and around with my lead hip. That opens up my body, gives the arms room to extend, and as I said, allows me to slow the club down. So your goal is to take something like an 8-iron and see how far you can hit the golf ball with the club staying short of your shoulders. It's difficult, but what it's really going to do is going to teach you to stop these impacts here where the body isn't really doing anything. It's not functioning well enough, and turn that into a tour pro-like finish where the body is really active. So that brings us on to phase 3, which is really just putting the first two together but actually having a slightly more external focus. So I'm going to take a tee, and I'm going to place it the width of a club head in front of the golf ball. If I make a poor swing, didn't really get into the left side, didn't use the body well enough, tee stays in place. That felt weak, it felt shallow, it felt like I scuffed the ground before the ball. So whilst I might get a decent result, I look down, tee's in place, that's my little checklist that I didn't do the right thing. So phase 3, and this is really when we start to put everything together and ultimately be able to take it to the course, if I can put the first phase in there, really getting into that lead side, keeping that left hip low, pushing out with my body, getting my arms extended, I will be able to strike the ball and the tee. Now I mentioned at the start something about for those of you who struggle with early extension. Let me show you the little trick. I need my alignment stick back for that. I've got my target out there. So if I took a setup here and you said shift forwards or laterally, I would shift this way towards the target. And you can see how the alignment stick is aligned towards the flag. Lateral to me would be in this direction. But what I see so many golfers doing is they get to the top and there is some hip turn. There should be hip turn. Not many of us are flexible enough to make a golf swing without hip turn. But look where the alignment stick is relative to the target. It now doesn't align to the target, it aligns way out to the right. So from here, when golfers shift forwards, they often shift in the direction of the alignment stick, which is out towards the right-hand side of that screen. So what happens all too often is we make this move, they shift forwards, hips are moving on this angle, they lose all their angles, and they are no longer in a position where they can deliver the club, strike the ball, and deliver the clubs we want. So if you want to get rid of your early extension, you've got to think about that lead hip not moving in this direction, but actually feeling like it's moving behind you. You've got to be moving that left hip behind you to keep your body angles. That allows me to get that pressure into that lead side and deliver the club efficiently. So it's a change in mindset. Forwards is the target, not the angle of the hips. That is a really key message. And if you can start to do that, and if I think about pulling my left hip behind me, we can start to strike it a lot better.